Hi, and welcome to the Maybe I Can podcast. I'm your host, Debbie Weiss. Last week, I shared with you that I am working on a new book, another version of the sprinkle effect, and I'm adding 12 new sprinkles. And I want to fill you in on what they are. I actually created these 12 because the next book is geared towards family caregivers. However, when I read these sprinkles, when I think about situations in my own life where I really needed a sprinkle of some of these things, I realize they're universal. They are not just for family caregivers. They are qualities that most of us need to remember that it's okay to sprinkle into our lives. So that brings me to the sprinkle of the week, which is a sprinkle of help or a sprinkle of asking for help. Asking for help, it's hard. I'm trying to think back to the craziest time in my life where I was managing my insurance agency. There was a time when Sam, my oldest, got diagnosed on the autism spectrum when he was 2.5. And my younger son, Ben, he's about 20 months younger. So at the time, he was still a baby. And when Sam got diagnosed, I knew I needed help. And I'm very grateful that I had an amazing friend who unfortunately has experience in this field. And she helped me to kind of piece together a therapy regimen, so to speak, for Sam. But during this time, I was honestly not working that much. My husband at the time worked with me in the insurance agency. So when all this was going on and the kids were so young, and then we found out that Sam needed that help, we would tag team and my husband would stay in the office and I would be home with the kids. And 2 days a week, I would go to the office and he would be at home with the kids. And during this time, right after Sam got diagnosed and Ben was so young, I was searching for anything and everything that could help Sam because back then it was very different receiving that diagnosis than it is today. Thankfully, today, there are so many more resources. There are so many more things that are typically covered by health insurance. And back 23 years ago when Sam was diagnosed, the doctor literally hands me a pamphlet and said, good luck. But what wound up happening was if I was going to take Sam far away, drivable far away, like for the day for some type of therapy, I was doing different types of music therapy and, of course, different types of applied behavioral analysis. And I was trying to figure out if I could get him to go to a typical preschool. And I was looking for therapists and a whole thing. I had no choice. I had to ask for help. I couldn't drag Ben along with me. Thankfully, I had an amazing friend, Leslie, who had 2 girls, similar age. We had met when our oldest were infants. And I had to ask her, and it was so hard. Please take care of Ben for me while I take Sam so-and-so to such and such a place. Meanwhile, I still had my dad to care for. And so many things were going on. I'm trying to hold everything together. I'm coordinating schedules. I'm trying to figure out who needed what. Felt like everybody needed something from me at the same time. You know that feeling? Because somewhere along the way, I just decided on my own, it's easier to just do everything myself. It's easier because I know what's happening. Maybe they're not going to do it the same way. And I wasn't just physically exhausted. I was mentally exhausted because I was carrying kind of everyone, my father, my kids, really my husband too, on my shoulders. I think that so many people live this way. Not because we want to, but because somewhere along the way, we learned that being strong means being self-sufficient. And if we aren't, then we're weak. Why do so many people avoid asking for help? We don't want to be weak. We think asking for help means that we are weak. We don't want to burden anyone, right? It's hard to ask for help, and gosh, maybe they're busy. Maybe I'm going to put them in a position where they're not going to feel comfortable saying no. Maybe you just think nobody's going to do it correctly or do it like you. Possibly during this time, I was a control freak. And maybe I still have that issue on certain things. Or it could be you feel guilty. You feel guilty asking for help. So you think, I'll just do it myself. Or it's so much easier this way. Or maybe you think, I should be able to handle this. What is wrong with me? And sometimes when we do this, when we become so independent and we don't ask for help, it's almost like we're over functioning. And when you become the person who handles everything, what I realized is that those people around you, they stop realizing how much you're carrying because you're just doing it. Think about it. When you're not intimately involved in a situation, you don't really know all that that person is doing behind the scenes. Sure, you might see the big stuff, like in this case, let's just say with my father, you could see, okay, I took them to a doctor's appointment or I went food shopping for him, but you're not there in the day-to-day to see every single thing that I need to do for other people that makes up my day. So those people have no idea. Now, for me, when my father was ill, which again, I cared for him for a 30-year period of time, and it wasn't in the beginning, but after a couple of decades, I grew resentful. I resented my brother because he lived in another state. He would come in to New Jersey once, maybe twice a year to see my father, and he would see my father for 3 hours in the afternoon. And he had nothing to do with the caregiving, with the day-to-day. Now, he couldn't with the day-to-day because he lived in another state. But this resentment built because I would talk to him and think to myself as we were just chatting about what was going on in our lives. And I would be so resentful because I listened to the things that were happening, the things that he were enjoying. And I'm thinking, he's completely carefree. Now, obviously, that's not true. He had his own, like all of us have his own problems. But he didn't have to worry about all the things that I had to worry about every single day when it came to my father. It built slowly, that resentment. But I really didn't share it with him. Not really until the end, where kind of I almost had no choice because I was exploded. Not only was it hard to just accept the responsibility, but it was lonely, right? Because no one else could understand. And my brother couldn't understand because he wasn't living it. And if I had asked him to do something, whatever the something was, I'm sure he would have done it. It was just, when you don't share something, when you just are waiting for someone else to do or say something, that's not happening. You're the one who needs to ask for help, right? You have to help. Now, there's been a couple of times in my caregiving journey where I was in a position that I had no choice but to ask for help. So the first time was soon after, if you haven't heard me talk about this, my dad had a stroke a couple of days before he turned 46, and my parents soon divorced. And at that age, back then, there weren't as many different types of facilities as there are today. Goodness, he wasn't even over 55. And my mom found an independent living facility for him. We lived in Long Island, and the only place at that time that my mom could find was in New Jersey. And granted, it's not that far, but if you're from the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, what should take an hour on paper to get there, it never does because there's so much traffic in the area. So just point being, it was not hop, skip, and a jump to go see him on a regular basis, even though I did every few weeks. When my father first lived in this facility, he met a woman who lived there. She was maybe about 10 years older. And they became boyfriend and girlfriend. And it seemed obvious to me that she was using my father. I didn't know what for because my father had no money. In the end, my father tells me that they're going to get married and they're going to move out of this facility and get their own apartment. And I was beside myself. I had a funny feeling about this woman. I was concerned because there weren't a lot of facilities. That's why my mom had him in New Jersey instead of Long Island. And now they're going to move out. And what if he needs to go back into a facility? And how difficult is that going to be? And all the things. But, sick or not sick, he was my father and it's his life. And he married her. And they moved out. And it became obvious that she did marry him thinking that he had money. And when she found out that he didn't, she was quite annoyed. She took his credit card and she was obsessed with QVC. And she ran up all of his credit cards to the max, buying things off of QVC. And as time went on, my father would call me when she wasn't around or was in the other room, and he would be whispering or he would be crying because she was emotionally abusive to him and did some horrible things, said some horrible things. And eventually I convinced him, this has got to stop. You've got to get out of this relationship and get divorced. When he agreed, I thought to myself, now I have to find a place for him to live. Coincidentally, literally a mile from where I lived at the time in Long Island, a place opened. And so on my own, I went there. I found a place. I actually signed the contract. I had an apartment. How was I going to get him there? Because my father, and really me too, was afraid that if the woman, her name was Lucille, if Lucille found out that he was leaving her, we didn't know what she would do. So my cousin Mindy helped me devise this plan where we would figure out, Lucille would sometimes leave my father for the day. And we said, okay, that day that she's going to visit, we are going to figure out how to basically kidnap you. But I couldn't do this by myself. And Mindy and I couldn't do it alone. And I had no choice but to ask for help because I had to get him out of there. My brother had not yet moved away. This was really early on. And I had to ask for help. I had to ask my brother. I had to ask my brother's friends because we were renting a U-Haul truck. We were taking some of the furniture, of course, all his clothes and belongings and all the things. And we were moving him to Long Island. And we had, back then, I had to actually take him to the post office to get a change of address. I had to take him to the bank to close out that bank account because that bank, didn't exist in Long Island or whatever it was. And so I handled that and then physically taking my father to the new apartment, which he hadn't seen yet. And my cousin Mindy stayed back and kind of organized the whole move out situation. It was crazy. And the truth is, without them, I couldn't have done it. We did it, and Lucille came home to find a half-empty apartment, no forwarding address, and a note. We did leave a note. And for someone like me who was used to carrying everything herself, that was a huge realization. And honestly, it was such relief. And it felt really nice to be part of a team. We were like the kidnapping team, and that felt good. But that was a part where I didn't have a choice, right? I knew I couldn't do it myself. What happens when we don't ask for help? What happens to us? We become exhausted, certainly overwhelmed, emotionally depleted, and isolated. Very isolating. It's very isolating to do everything yourself, to hold all this emotion, maybe some resentment. You expect people to behave a certain way, right? We have these expectations. And when it doesn't happen, it's even harder. Because people just assume everything's fine. We're continuing to function. People think if she needs something, she'll ask. When you silently carry everything, people just don't know how heavy it is or how you're really feeling. And usually we do it until life finally pushes us to the point where we just physically can't do it anymore. And that's a place that none of us want to be. I had one other time where I had no choice but to ask for help. I was actually in Las Vegas at a convention. And while I was there, I got a phone call from my husband's doctor saying that he had had a blood test that I had taken him to right before I left for Las Vegas. And there was a very alarming result. And so they wanted him to come back and repeat the blood test. But my husband was unable to drive at that point. And here I am in Las Vegas. I had no other drivers in my household. My youngest son, I think, was in college, away at college. He couldn't do it. And Sam, my oldest, does not drive. Well, I had no choice. I had to call someone and say, please, can you take Gary to get this blood work done? And I did that. And I felt guilty. My friend, she's busy enough on her own, but she was super kind. And of course she did it. And after that results that they got very quickly, they determined that he needed to have a bone marrow biopsy. And in that case, I believe I asked my cousin to drive, she lives about an hour away, and come get him and do this. And it was so hard because I felt helpless and I wanted to leave Las Vegas, before the convention ended. But I had a friend with me, and the logistics of paying and getting us out of there in time, we couldn't get out of there in time. Everything was happening so quickly. So I had no choice to ask for help. And I felt helpless. Even though they helped, I felt helpless about the situation. I was uncomfortable asking. I was guilty, but then I was relieved. And what surprised me is that they jumped at the chance to help. Sometimes when you ask for help, it isn't weakness. Even though we think it is, it's accepting the reality that this is what needs to happen for the good of everyone else. What's interesting is, in both of these situations, kidnapping my father and being in Las Vegas when Gary needed to get to the doctor, I asked for help because I truly had no choice. I physically couldn't do it alone, but looking back, the harder thing for me was really asking for help during all the years when technically I probably could still manage it, right? But I've felt exhausted. I was resentful. I was overwhelmed, but I was still functioning. And just because I was able to function and carry something alone, it doesn't mean that that's what we're supposed to do. I think a lot of us wait until there's a crisis before we allow ourselves to get support. All right, let's talk about how we apply the sprinkle effect method to this sprinkle of help. Again, the sprinkle effect method, see it, sprinkle it, shift it. See it, notice what's happening, sprinkle it, ask for what you need, What sprinkle do you need? And shift it by making one small adjustment. And I think that sometimes for all of us, caregiver or not, the hardest sprinkle is to ask for help. When you're over functioning, carrying everything, to see it, you have to realize I'm overwhelmed. I'm resentful. I'm trying to carry everything myself. That's seeing it. What do I actually need? I need support. I need help. I need to feel relief. And so then if we know that and we shift it by taking one small step. So stop assuming people know what you need. They don't. You've got to tell them. Allow imperfect help. Okay, so maybe they're not going to do it exactly the way that you do. Who cares? Stop believing that you have to do everything alone. The shift isn't getting people to do everything. The shift is really realizing that you don't have to do it alone. With Gary's appointment, this was easy. See it. I physically can't be there. It was very obvious. And so I needed to sprinkle it with asking for help because I needed help. And the shift was trust people enough to allow them to step in. You can think about it again, not just as a caregiver. What about at work or as a parent? You could be overwhelmed, but you pretend that everything is fine, right? You've got to be able to recognize that. That's what the see it is. In hindsight, usually it's quite easy to know what was happening at the moment. But when you're in the thick of it, you really need to pause to try and assess what is happening right now. How do I feel? And so maybe it could be a work thing that you're overwhelmed, but you're pretending to be fine. We know what the sprinkle it is. This is a sprinkle of asking for help. It could be you realize I need to sprinkle it with support. I need support. I need to ask for help. And the shift could be delegating one task. And I'm telling you, when you delegate one task, it could be one tiny thing, it feels good. And then maybe you'll allow that to happen just a little bit more, a little bit more. I think about it and turn the tables, right? What if you know that you have a friend, a family member who is in a tough situation? And you're always like, oh, if you need anything, I'm here. But you can see how overwhelmed they are, how much they're carrying. But you don't know what you can do to help them, even though you want to help them. So when someone asks you for help, it's almost, oh, thank goodness. Now you told me what I could do to support you. I just didn't know. And so not only are you willing to help, you're thrilled. You're thrilled that finally you're able to be there for your friend or your loved one. You're really doing someone else a favor by asking them for help. And I think that we need to flip that mindset. Asking for help, it maybe makes us feel like, we're being a burden, or someone's going to say no, or I'm giving up control, as we already mentioned. It could be a prideful thing. If I ask for help, that's admitting that I can't handle it on my own. But what's wrong with that? Needing help is a part of being human, right? We get help every day in so many different ways. Otherwise, you might as well just lock yourself in a room all by yourself for the rest of your life. Strong people are not people who never need help. They are actually people who are willing to admit when they do. And that mindset shift really can change your life in so many different ways. So my challenge to you this week is ask for help with one thing. Not everything. If it makes you feel comfortable, make it something very small, but just try it. Maybe it's emotional support. Maybe you need a little time. Maybe you just need someone to listen to you, right? Or maybe you have to ask someone to go food shopping or to the pharmacy or whatever it is. Just remember, you do not and you should not carry everything to prove you're strong. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. And asking for help does not mean you're weak. Looking back, some of the hardest seasons of my life became manageable because people helped me carry them. And maybe strength isn't carrying everything alone. It's allowing people to help carry it with you. Just because you can carry something alone doesn't mean you're supposed to. If you need to, I want you to save this podcast. I want you to listen to it over and over again. So many of us struggle with this. But I'm telling you, once you change your perspective and you start asking for what you need, your life will change. So thank you for listening. Please message me on Instagram, debbie.r.weiss. Send me an email, debbie@debbierweiss.com, because nothing feels better to me than knowing that I maybe gave you a new idea to think about. This might not even be a new idea. Come on, we all know about asking for help. Maybe something that I said resonated with you and hopefully sparked in you the idea that you are going to realize you're going to see what's going on in your life. You're going to sprinkle it by asking for help and shift one thing. Ask one person for one small thing this week. You've got that. I know you do. Make it a great week. I know you can, and I'll see you next week.